Hello, and welcome to another episode of Activating Greatness. This is the show where we dig into what it really takes to lead with purpose, inspire performance, and create lasting impact. I'm your host, Alec McChesney, and every episode we sit down with leaders, thinkers, and change makers who are unlocking potential in themselves, their teams, and their organizations. We're going to talk about the real stuff: leadership that drives culture, strategy that creates momentum, and the mindset that turns good intentions into game-changing results. Because greatness isn't a title, it's a choice. It's something that you activate every single day. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being part of a community of leaders who refuse to settle. Now, I am very excited for today's episode because this is an episode a long time in the making, as I'm going to be interviewing Brooke Page-Thompson, the president of Velocity Advisory Group. And this is technically our seventh ever podcast recording together. For the previous 2.5 years, we've been recording podcasts under the name of the Getting Unstuck series, where we talked about everything from management to leadership to how to handle trauma and drama inside the workforce. And today we're going to talk a little bit about everything. I think, Brooke, anytime you and I meet, it's 45 minutes of chaos and we go from one topic to the next. But I think we're going to dive into some of this concept of managing, leading, and coaching the whole human being. And before we even jumped on, you were talking about life not being linear, and you got to connect the dots looking backwards. And I am so excited. But before we go off and run, why don't you introduce yourself? This is the second ever episode of the Activating Greatness podcast. We have Dave Feckman as episode 1. You are episode 2. So for those who maybe aren't familiar with you, Brooke, why don't you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. Well, I'm Brooke Page-Thompson, president of Velocity Advisory Group. I've been president for 16 months now, and have really just loved my 5.5-year journey with Velocity and what all we've been able to do. And obviously bringing you into the fold has been such a gift for the organization, and we're so excited. I knew a long time ago that if you and I ever had the chance to spin off a podcast, it would be around something like this. So look at that. Intentions do come real. Background is HR, talent management. I've been in that space for quite some time in the consulting world and leadership development programs, as well as I'm a mindfulness teacher and a yoga instructor. And so I do incorporate some mindfulness topics whenever I can, because I do believe the whole person, like we're going to talk about today, isn't just about how you show up at work. It's all of the things that define who you are, why you're here, and how you can make the world a better place.
I love it. I love it. And I think there's no better testament to this whole person philosophy than me maybe being at Velocity and you putting up with me on a day-to-day basis, because how many times in the last 3 months have we jumped on a one-on-one and you said, "How are you?" And 7 minutes later, I finally take a breath and I say, "So yeah, that's what's going on over here." And you're like, "Great. Okay, let's pick them apart one by one." And that recognition of what I need from a one-on-one or a coach or a manager is completely different than what somebody else might need, or it might be even completely different than what you're used to as a coach or a manager. And so I'm really excited to be able to talk about this a little bit more and maybe I don't know if we should bring some of our conversations to light, because they probably people wouldn't want to listen to me rant even longer. But I think giving that kind of backstage pass, or pulling the curtains of what this can tangibly look like when you are trying to hit goals and you have processes that you have to be able to follow at the same time, you still want to work with the individual at their level too.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I have no doubt.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. Like we said, we've got an outline. We're going to jump all over the place, but I do want to talk about this concept of the whole human leadership, especially in 2025 going into 2026. I think, in past episodes, you and I have talked about how every individual is different, but you've built your career really around developing leaders and cultures where people can show up as their full selves. And that full self isn't just my 8 to 5 or my 9 to 5, right? This is who I am every day at all times. So what does whole human leadership mean in the workplace? I think for a lot of people, they might be hearing that for the first time. That it might be a concept that they're familiar with. It might be a concept that they're not familiar with. So why don't you break
Mm.
that down for us, and then let's just talk about why does it matter, probably more than ever, in recent years as we enter into 2026.
Yeah, I love this topic of whole human leadership. I think it's coming up more and more now. I'm hearing a lot more industry leaders and even within Team Velocity talking about whole human leadership. And I think part of it's being driven by how much AI is creeping into the day to
Mm,
day work and really this hyper fixation of CEOs that want everything to go AI, and then everybody else is like, "Whoa, time out. AI can only help with so many things." There's a human aspect that needs to still exist, and then understanding that it's not just a human doing widgets and creating stuff that may or may not matter. It's really leaning into this concept of if we're going to find ways to automate work and make it more efficient to create more time, then what are we going to do with our time?
yeah.
And I think Daniel Pink wrote a book similar to this. I'm drawing a blank on the name, but this concept of if we're given more time in the day to do work, the only way this is successful or meaningful is if we start to lean into what it means to be human. And so having creativity around maybe things that feel soft or fuzzy that
Mm,
you wouldn't normally think are part of work, but they are. And in order to do that, we have to kind of pull back this layer of I got to be one version of myself when I'm at a job and then another version of myself when I'm at home. If we really take a step back and say, well, wait a minute, what if you were just authentically you
mm,
all the time? Then how does that create opportunity for you? How does that help your team lean in different directions because you're being authentic and they're being authentic? And that was a word that came up for me when I thought about this question was authenticity. I think is a big reason why we need this approach today because people don't. Everybody I know is like, oh, AI wrote that, chat wrote that.
yeah.
Oh, that's not a real human. Like I watched a commercial, that can't be true. So we're like hyper fixating now on is this real or is this not real? And if I can say that I have authenticity in how I show up and my team knows that and my clients know that, the world knows that, there's no questioning that how I show up at the table is going to be out of anything but true authenticity to my values, to my core, to how I show up in the world. And that's what people I think are really gravitating to and they're hungry for it because we don't want to live in a fake world. We want to
Mm,
live in a world that is truly authentic and supports us in the best way possible. So I think that it's becoming a bigger topic because of a lot of fast-paced implications that are just hitting the workforce, and a lot of people are just tired of it. They want to find a better way to show up. They want to feel that they're connecting to their jobs, and they don't want to have to fake it till they make it at home or at work. It's
mm.
just too exhausting to try and wear that many different hats. So I think this concept of showing up authentically is a big deal.
Yeah, I love it. There's so much good there, and I also can't stop thinking about Severance, the TV show where we sever and we get to be one person and then another person at home. I think that the word authenticity got such a bad rap for like 2 to 3 years, and I think
Mm,
LinkedIn played a big role in that. And I also think everybody's advice of how to make it in content and how to make it at work was just be authentic, be authentic, be authentic. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, like that was a non-negotiable. And then we kind of put it on this pedestal above everything else, above having subject matter expertise, above
Mm,
being a
mhm,
good manager, being a good leader, is just be authentic. And it's interesting now as that has kind of gone to a void. I have not seen, since AI started being a bigger player and more content is created by AI, be authentic is suddenly no longer this automatic message that you are getting, because
mm,
there is this perception of how can I use AI? How can I do this? And it's not go and do the thing the way that you would do it. And that might include AI. It might not, right? Like the way that I use AI is way different than the way a really good person with AI would be able to use AI. And so I do think, and speaking from experience, people who are listening to this is probably this might be the first time you've ever listened to Alec McChesney. I'm a lot, and I'm a lot at home, and I'm a lot at work. And I have been blessed with leaders like yourself, with leaders like Leela Furla, Kelly Medwick, even going back to, way back when at the Kansas City Star, Jeff Rosen, that saw that and said, if we try to cut those wings, he's not going to be good at his job, right? I
yeah.
won't be effective. And, I think allowing for that space is something that I think is a superpower for a lot of managers and leaders that I don't know if everybody knows that that can be a superpower, or that they do it
Mm.
or don't do it, right? They might not even know that they are cutting the wings. They might not know that they're letting the wings fly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I love it that you use yourself as an example because we were just on a debrief 2 days ago with one of our partners at TMA Performance. They have an assessment called Talents, and a few of us at Velocity took it because we're trying to figure out how do we use this. Is it what kind of platform or tool could we offer to our
Yeah.
clients? And I remember I was reading through mine. And I'm like, oh, I can't let Dave see this because it's like so accurately correct. Like, I don't like rules. I don't follow rules. I don't like like rigid structures. I don't like. There's a lot that was in it. And I'm like, yeah, I totally show up this way. And I think that's partly why I probably look at people that bring a lot of energy is like I can't squelch that because I don't want to be squelched,
Mm.
right? I would not thrive in an organization that put me in limitations or told me I had to fit in this box. And if I have been put there before, I don't last very long.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah, I am like exit stage left. And and I've left jobs that have been very limiting and wing clipping,
Hmm.
right? Like to your point, I've left jobs with no idea what I was going to do next. I just knew I couldn't stay any longer.
Right.
And in those moments where I've had really toxic bosses or people that have told me, you're a direct reflection of me, therefore you can't have an opinion that's different than mine. Right. I
Mm.
remember thinking the first time I heard it, I was like, that can't be true. And the second time I heard it from a different boss, I was like, how afraid are you
Hmm.
of someone pushing a button or having an opinion that's different? And it was at that moment that I was like, I don't ever want to be that kind of leader.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to ever work for me and not think like I grew a ton, and not even if they remember who I am or what my name was. That doesn't matter. But they knew in that job something was different because they weren't being put or defined in a box. They were given capability and flexibility to be more authentic and to ask
Mm.
questions. And you want to do a rotation assignment? Let's go find out how to get you over in that group because you're not you're not me and I
Mm.
don't own you, right? And so good leaders do that. They find opportunities for people who just have a drive and motivation to learn more, to be more, to do more, and it's like how do I get you there?
Hmm.
And even if I'm not joking, even if you don't remember me, it's okay
Mm.
because it's not about me. It's about you and your journey, and all of us opening opportunity and doors for each other so that Alec can be authentic in the job that he does. Brooke can be authentic in the job that she does, because we know, we've seen it, when you give people capability to do that, the best things come out of it.
Yeah.
It's like momentum that you can't stop, and it's just powerful to watch.
I so much to follow up on, but it's actually it's kind of the opposite of the last point that you just made, which is the momentum, right? And we're talking that last piece of the puzzle there. You're talking about things going right. And I think what I would love to do is talk about, what about when things are going wrong? And so when you are a leader and somebody's listening to this and they know they have somebody that is a high performer, is they should be reaching their potential, they should be steps away from taking that next role, but they're talking the way that you and I just were, where, oh man, I feel like I'm in a box. I feel like I'm not doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. And going back to our previous series of content, getting unstuck and mindfulness, I think we talked about that at the individual level. But from a
Mhm.
leader's perspective, what are some things that, if you are a leader and you notice that you have this individual who is or should be at the top of their game, and maybe he or she isn't, and they're struggling, how can you, whether it's practicing the mindfulness or just taking a beat and taking it out of the day to day, what are some steps that leaders can put into place with their teams on a consistent basis to ensure that we catch those individuals before it's 9 months too late and they're willing to take any job under the sun? What does that look like in your mind?
So I've had people on my teams where in the past where you can see there's like agitation building.
Mm,
They're curt or short, or they don't care as much anymore. They don't, like, there's just something off. And this is hard when you have high empathy, because you don't want to overstep a boundary, right? And so I've had to play the card very carefully, but I do believe in having weekly one-on-ones with your team. So I'm just going to put a plug out there for leaders that are listening. If you're not meeting with your people regularly, you're not going to know when the symptoms start to show up, and you're not going to
mm,
be able to get ahead of it faster, because those one-on-ones are not just a time for you to check in on how work is going, but it's also like a gauge on how is life, right?
mhm.
How are you today? Like, I ask you all the time, how are you today? Because I genuinely want to know, are you okay?
Yeah.
So um but what I've often done is, when I start to see, like, one-off behaviors for like a week or two, I don't really pay much attention to. But when it starts to become week after week after week, and they become more and more, they pull away from team meetings, they don't contribute as much. I just say, hey, can I take you out for coffee?
Mm,
And I just want to talk. Take the boss hat off. I'm not here to be your manager or leader right now. I just want to have a heart, like, let's just talk about how you are.
mhm,
And oftentimes I'll just ask the question, are you happy here?
mm.
And 9 out of 10 times, they're like, tears start streaming down faces, because someone finally asked the question.
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, then it's like, well, is this somewhere you want to be and stay?
Mhm,
If that answer is no, then it's like, okay, then let's find a transition plan, right? And
mhm.
I'll make introductions to my network. I want to help you land in a good spot. But if the answer is yes, then unpack for me, how did you get here?
Mm,
And what is it that I might be contributing or doing that's causing some of this pain or angst that's going on? And I think as leaders, we forget that just asking the question, like, hey, how's Alec today?
mm.
If you're having a rough day, maybe not you in particular, but other people that are having a rough day might just gloss over and say, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And it's not until we start to watch for some of the nonverbal cues that show us that people are struggling. I mean, everybody's struggling. The world is hard.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like, we talked about this on our last one. We're kind of in a dumpster fire right now. And
Yeah.
so asking that question can be very loaded. The caveat to that is that I have to know how I am in that moment when I ask the question.
Mm,
Because if I'm not emotionally or mentally prepared to handle what's about to come at me, it could get really messy.
yeah.
So this is a little bit of a dance, right? To try and have empathy, try and help people feel like they can talk about things or be vulnerable if they're not enjoying something or something's really bothering them, but
Mm,
also understanding it is work and we have a job to do and it can't be all wishy-washy and hugs all the time.
yeah.
So if something is going bad, it all comes down to communication. You have to be willing to have the conversation. And if you're not, you probably shouldn't be a leader. And yeah, I'm just
No,
gonna leave it at that.
it's a great answer. And I think, three things come to my mind as I hear you walk through that. The first is the one-on-ones. Too often we're hearing people are surprised that a person is quitting or a person is unhappy, and we realize that check-in hasn't happened in a month or in a quarter or maybe ever.
Ever.
And that not having the pathway to even get the human connection at all, you're already setting yourself up for disappointment and failure there. The second one is you kind of alluded to it, but when you're asking those questions about are you happy here and you're kind of digging deeper, you also have to be able to prepare for how can we genuinely solve it? Is that
Mhm,
something that we can solve? Well, you're happy in the role and this is the role. This is what we're needing you to do. And so you have to have some of those tough conversations and go back. We recorded a podcast earlier today that will air a couple weeks after this one that was all about the tough conversation is the kindest thing that you can do. And if they're
mhm,
surprised by the tough conversation, then you probably missed 3, 4, 5, 6 other opportunities for that tough conversation. And then the third thing is I go back to that question that you and I have talked about, which is, how is Alec showing up at his best? What makes Alec tick? What makes Brooke tick? When do I do my best work? And what does that look like? Because if you don't know that from me, then it's going to be really hard for you to know when I am in a rut, when I am off. And yeah, some of that can happen through observations, but others, it has to happen in conversation. And if you and I ever have a one-on-one that lasts 30 minutes on the dot and then we hang up, it's probably like, hey, we should call for help, send help to Omaha,
mhm,
Nebraska, right? And so I think being able to take note of those things and compile it all so it doesn't get to that point where that person feels really helpless, I think is it all comes back to this whole person mindfulness and what role leaders can play in helping their employees get unstuck.
mhm. And I think the important thing here, just to double click on a little bit,
Yeah.
is to your point. I'm drawing a blank on who said it. I want to say it might have been Martin Luther King Jr., but there's a quote we use in one of our programs. I think it's in Critical Conversations that basically the gist is um, the relationship starts to die the day we stop talking about the things that matter.
Mm,
So think of a marriage,
damn. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You have an issue with your spouse or something's
Mm,
off, or maybe you've lost the luster of the first 5 years of marriage and now you're in the thick of it, right?
yeah.
Same thing in a job. We have a honeymoon period in a job and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, this is what I signed up for. And if you're too afraid to have the conversation with the person that can help you fix it, it's gonna start to die.
Mm,
And you see it all over the place, not just in relationships but also with jobs. And I think there's some jobs out there that this may not apply to just because of the nature of the job. It's very tactical and a little more industrial based, but for most people in the world, if we're too afraid to have the hard conversation or we're too worried about what response we're going to get from the other person or letting someone down,
mm,
then we can guarantee that probably in 6 to 9 months, just like to your point, in 6 to 9 months, they're probably going to go.
Yeah.
So you have to be okay with having hard conversations and recognizing this has nothing to do with you.
Mm,
Nothing to do with you. You're just a part of the dance that's happening in life. And the minute something is brought to your attention as a problem or an issue, you either lean into it or you don't. And I think good leaders lean into it and say, how can we solve this? How do we make it better?
mm-hmm,
And I think leaders that are very, um, either their wings have been clipped or
mm,
they haven't had training or they just don't know what they're doing, they lean away from it because it's hard.
yeah.
And being a whole human in life is leaning into the hard.
Mm. You use that example of the marriage, and even you start to think about, you know, family drama that's passed down, and how my dad handles something is pretty much going to be how I handle something, which for better or for worse, Maxine's probably going to handle it that way too. And you think about that in the same way as why we need to train and develop the next generation of leaders inside
Mhm.
organizations, because if there is that void of training, and the manager or leader above them maybe didn't have some of the skill sets or chops that we're talking about, then they don't either. And so if they've never received hard conversations, then they're not going to be able to have hard conversations. And it's a trickle down effect, which is a perfect segue for me as the host of this episode to talk about the next generation of leaders. And you have been a pivotal aspect of Velocity, designing and running leadership programs across all industries, specifically for that next generation, right? We, you know, the emerging leaders, momentum management. Like when we're talking about getting these leaders to be ready for those positions in a really complicated time, hybrid and remote, burnout, constant change. I can't go 3 minutes. I mean, legitimately on my second screen is LinkedIn right now, and all of the news on the right side of the LinkedIn is terrible. It's rate cuts, it's layoffs, you know, it's all of the above. So when you think about this next generation, outside of maybe those tough conversations and this whole human leadership, what are the skill sets that you're focused on in these programs? What are the skill sets and mindsets that this next generation of leaders are going to need to have in order to be successful? And they might be managing 3 or 4 different generations too as part of this. So what does that look like in your mind?
I I'm actually like I kind of want to sit back with a box of popcorn and just kind of watch how this all
Yeah,
evolves
yeah.
because it is such a different way of thinking. This incoming generation and the millennials. I mean, your generation, Alec, has challenged status quo in the workplace pretty significantly, especially with more flexibility. People want more work from home options. I actually saw a stat the other day that said more and more people are prioritizing in job offers the hybrid remote work than they are
Absolutely.
compensation, which is a complete pivot from the boomers and
Yep.
even my generation. And um, although I think I lean a little more millennial than I want to admit, I value work from home. I've always thought I get my best work done when I don't have to commute into an office. And but this next generation, I'm finding the ones that are really standing out for companies are the ones who are curious.
Mm,
So they're not coming in trying to change a system or a process. There's some understanding that yeah, they're smart and they're bringing in a skill set that's helpful because they're highly educated oftentimes. They've done a lot of work. Their parents are highly educated. And so they come in with a lot of data, right? A lot of, to your point, mindset
mm,
components of how things should be done. But the ones who are curious and ask questions and genuinely lean into people that they report into, to ask, like, hey, how did you get to where you are?
Mhm.
What are some things that I should start in my daily routine? I know you're going to talk about this later. That make me a better human, that make me how do I stand out amongst the rest of them? And I even think back to my first 10 years of work. I started on swing shift in Omaha, Nebraska at First Data when they were headquartered there,
Yeah.
teaching English as a second language workers how to run credit card machines, basically the statements that got printed for credit cards. And I remember being like, gosh, did I just go to college to do this for the rest of my life? Um, but I remember being like, but that's okay because I have to start somewhere.
Mm.
Because my parents told me you have to start somewhere, and then you just raise your hand and you go and do the things that, even if you don't know what you're doing, lean into it and go do the stuff. And
Mhm.
so for my whole career, I've always raised my hand for a project in consulting that I was like, I know nothing about SAP. You need change management? Sure. I can go to Australia for 6 months and go run change management for supply chain. I have no idea what supply chain is, but I will learn. And I have had the best opportunities of my life because I didn't put myself in a box because the job I was hired for said I was supposed to do this.
Mm.
I just leaned into it and said, can the box have rounded edges? And can I kind of tiptoe over here? It's still kind of in the same lane. And I love it when I meet the new generations coming in where they have a curious mindset, they do good work, they lean on technology, but not to the point that it cripples or stifles their ability to connect to other humans.
Yep.
And I love it when I meet, Gen Zers that are like, I'm not on social. I'm just not on social. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
love that for you because your brain is probably a safer place.
Yeah, it definitely is. It most definitely is. And I think that, I mean, we've talked a lot about the curiosity mindset and
Mhm.
just how much of a superpower that is, the ability to ask questions, the ability to ask questions seeking to help versus to, poke and point problems. And I think one of the knocks that I've heard over millennials and Gen Z is expectations, that we have too great of expectations. I should be X job title or responsibility or salary by a certain time.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't know the phrase here, but the curiosity is the solve to that. I really believe that if you have the curiosity without the expectation that it's going to get you here or there or the next place, you're going to get to the next place.
Mhm.
And I think that is something that you have to embody at the leadership level. And the best organizations that I see allow that Gen Z individual, that millennial, to ask the questions and then let them pull on the cord and say, "Hey,
Mhm.
that's a really good thought. Why aren't we doing it that way?" Whereas the ones who are not are saying, "Hey, we don't care. We don't want to know the answer to that question and we want to move on." And that's why they are maybe having some of that attrition of the younger talent across the board too. And I think that's they're the generation that's going to be leading all of us at some point. I mean, one way or the other. They're going to be involved in at every step of the way over the next couple of years. So um, I think that the more that we can do to embody the spirit that they have, while yeah, I can hear some of the professionalism arguments and those things. I think it's a really interesting time to have a millennial mindset or a Gen Z mindset.
Yeah, and I like, just even as you're talking, thinking about, I'm not gonna generalize, but
Mm,
there is um a lot of chatter with Gen Z in particular, not so much millennials, but Gen Z, that their lack of social skills is
yeah.
like off the charts. And awkwardness in communicating with people because they're so
Mm,
digitally familiar, that's where most of their interaction is happening, is over a screen, not with a human. It's oftentimes pre-curated content on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok or chat, and so just if you think about that, and we're moving into an era of more whole human
hmm
aspect, how does that work?
You're asking the right question, and I genuinely, as I'm thinking, what I think is there's a reckoning coming, right? Like
Oh, for sure.
one way or the other, and I don't know who it was. It was an actor. I was gonna say it was Edward Norton, but it wasn't. And I just watched this video of him talk about how he understands that AI is going to change the world, but he hates it and he hates every aspect of it. And then talked about all of the other beautiful parts of the whole human being and the creativity and the person behind the science is what drove this innovation or
Mm,
that innovation. And then he admitted, he's like, I get it. It's yeah, I can't stop it, but it's going to cause, irreversible damage. And so, yeah, you got a heck of a question there, Brooke. And I think if you solve that, you can make a lot of money for yourself. Probably write a book, a couple of keynote speaking engagements.
I mean, it's just like dawning on me right now, like, oh, you know what moment of what does this look like? You
hmm
know? Um, but talking of interesting books, it's a Dan Brown book if you read
Mm.
the Da Vinci or
Yeah.
Robert Langdon.
Yeah. Yeah.
His new one just came out called The Secret of Secrets, and it's based in Prague, and it's about consciousness, which of course I am like totally addicted
All
to.
about. Yeah.
But there is a theory in there that that the main character has come up with about the brain, and you read it and you're like, I could totally see how this would be like legitimate fact. So
Mm.
you got to read the book. I'm not going to give a spoiler
Yeah.
alert or
No.
anything away, but just talking about like the whole human aspect and the power of the brain and how little we tap into it, and how the more we drown it out with pre-curated content, maybe it sparks something, but maybe it dulls something
hmm
else in the process. And that's why when we talk about mindfulness, it's so powerful, because we're stepping away from the noise and giving the brain a chance to quiet. And I know this is hard for a lot of people, so we won't go too deep into this, but the whole premise is to quiet the mind. And why do we do that? It's
Mm.
so that the nervous system rebalances, and it's also so that we can download, because when there's too much cluttering the
So
brain,
much. Yeah.
you can't you can't have intuition, you can't have those little like glimmers of information that just drop in, right?
Mm.
And the mind has to clear out the clutter in order for that to happen. And what happens when you get stuck in Facebook reel hell?
Yeah.
It's
hmm
all clutter in your brain
Yep.
that's in 90-second snippets. And when people say I don't have time to meditate or have mindfulness moments, I'm like, how much time did you spend on Facebook last night?
Mm.
And
Too
then they don't
much.
want to talk to me anymore.
Yeah, too much. Well, and they don't want to talk to you anymore is great. I like, no, the conversation's over. No,
We're done.
it it's so interesting because to all of your points there, and some people who don't want to hear this, and it's not necessarily everything that we're talking about. It's a little bit of a detour, but for me it comes back to, if you're going to manage the whole person, you have to be able to show up as the whole person.
Yeah.
And if you don't have these capabilities, and for some, it's yoga and meditation. For other, it's running and,
Yeah.
boxing or whatever it is. But there has to be something that allows you to not be
Off.
technologically driven, and, for you to be able to process all of the things that are happening on a day-to-day basis, which brings us to the leadership round. This is a new aspect of our Activating Greatness podcast, where we're going to ask every leader that we interview these four same questions. Are you prepared, Brooke, for the 4 questions?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number 1. What is one leadership habit that you rely on every day, no matter what?
So I try to do this every day. I'm not going to say I'm great at it, but I
I
try to
love
do
it.
it every day. I too am human, so I'm not perfect. Um, I try to take 5 deep breaths before I get out of bed,
Mm,
and I say a little moment of gratitude for another day because we're not guaranteed another day. So I try to have gratitude before I even get out of bed. I prioritize, I call it my house health, which is like I have animals that need attention in the
mm,
morning. I have Brooke that needs some attention in the morning. I have things that need to happen in order for my house to feel, because I work from home. So
mm.
it needs to be an environment that I feel comfortable in. And so there's some things that need to happen in the mornings in order for the rest of my day to flow. And I do that before I look at my phone.
Love it.
So I don't get distracted by the 1800 whatever's notifications are on my home screen. And I try to meditate for 5 minutes a day. I don't necessarily do it in the morning. A lot of
Mm,
times mine is in the afternoon. It's a really good way for me to kind of cut the day off from the work schedule. And I know Dave is the complete opposite of me. So I find it comical. We're on different spectrums, but 5 minutes of meditation, if I can get a workout in, I will, but it's not, I don't hold myself to too rigid of structures every day
I
because
love it.
the day
The
changes.
days changes, and every day is a new day, and I also just love building the base of the day in gratitude, which is great. Question number 2. What is the most underrated skill that a leader needs to succeed in 2026?
So we've talked about it already, but curiosity.
Yeah, I
I
love it.
think that if you're not curious, you're not going to make it.
Yeah. Hard stop, period, the end, microphone drop. Moving on to question number 3. What is one thing on the opposite end of this? What is one thing that you believe great leaders should stop doing?
Thinking they're the smartest person in the room. I don't know about you, but I've noticed that, and we didn't talk much about this, but the concept of the ego mind
Mm,
and how when you take on bigger positions or larger teams or a different role, the ego mind can get very happy with itself that look at how smart I am and look at how successful I am. And those things are all healthy and good, but it's when it starts to get to the point where the leader thinks they should be the one talking all the time instead of listening more. They're
mhm,
ones that are like they shove any idea out the window because, well, that's not how I would do it. So come back to me with how I would want it done. And it's like, if you're not curious, you're not going to make it. And if you think you're the smartest person in the room, your team's not going to stay with you.
mm. I love
You'll
it.
have very high turnover.
Yeah, and that goes back to everything that we talked about earlier, just from a different viewpoint, a different
Mhm.
lens, right? Number 4, final question here. What is the best leadership advice that you've ever received?
So my dad had these made. It's called
Wow.
Rule Number 6. Don't take yourself so seriously. And it's from a book called The Art of Possibility.
Hmm.
And this is years ago, but he had one made for every person that worked for him to put on their desk as a reminder that when life got hard or the CEO was berating people or throwing things at them, that don't take it so seriously that your job kills you or um, you have a massive medical issue because work became too much.
Mm.
So I have had one of these since I was 21. I'm not going to tell you how old I am now, but I'm not 21. And it sits on a shelf in my office. It's gone to every office I've ever had in a work environment, and it goes right smack in the middle of my desk.
Mm.
And anyone who walks in sees it and they kind of laugh, like, oh, rule number 6. And I'm like, yeah, don't take yourself too seriously.
I love it, and maybe we'll have another episode on rule number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, just to see what those are.
There you go.
I need to get one of those made for myself. This has been absolutely fantastic. We're already at the 45-minute mark, which, if you can imagine, every time Brooke and I get together, it's automatically a talking fest back and forth. This continuation, if you will, of the Getting Unstuck series, I can picture us recording a lot more of episodes and featuring some of our clients at Velocity, where you and I get to go back and forth over an emerging leaders program, or somebody that you're working with intimately on the coaching side, or momentum management, and just some of the different programs and problems that we are building and solving. And to that end, I do have a final question, which is, who is a leader that you've worked with, either historically or through Velocity, that you believe that we should interview next? Someone who is doing really meaningful work that others will be able to learn from, the same way that others have learned from you over the last 46 minutes.
Oh. So I went completely left field on this.
Oh, I love this.
So one that's top of mind, her name is Hillary Blair.
Okay.
And she is a speech coach, but she trains people to how to do TED Talks, but she does a lot with leaders on how body language is such a big deal in a room. She helps people with tone inflection, especially up and coming women in particular, on how to really step into their voice. And she travels all over the world doing this. She used to be a Broadway actress, and so she's got lots of specialty training. But I love Hillary Blair. She's just the coolest human, and she's here in Denver. And so I think she should come on the podcast at some point.
I love it. I'm going to send her this exact video of you hyping her up and say, this is the vote right here Brooke put out there. And so we need to make it happen. As always, Brooke, this has been fantastic. I'm already looking forward to our next recording. For everybody that is listening to this, whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, on the Velocity Advisory Group website, YouTube, you can listen to this anywhere. Episodes are going to come out every Monday in 2026. We've got, I think, already 14 guests lined up, and some recorded, that as you're listening to this, there's more coming out. If you're listening and you're like, man, my boss or I should be on that podcast, just send a note. Send a note over, find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure I've probably already interrupted your day because I've connected with you on LinkedIn just by you thinking about it. But send us a note. We want to share your story. The goal for this show is for us to share stories of every type of leader, and what leader looks like in one organization and one industry is going to be completely different than the next. And so we want to pull the curtain back and share your story the same way that we did with Brooke today. And when you did listen to this episode, I know you thought it was fantastic. So leave a 5-star review. I have to prove that this is working to my bosses, Brooke and Dave. And so 5-star reviews, comments, engagements, let us know what you like and don't like. If you disagree with anything, bring it up with Brooke, not with me. And I'm sure we'd be happy to have you on and dissect it. So that is it for another episode of Activating Greatness. Brooke, as always, thank you so much.
Thanks, Alec.